So House Democrats just proposed a $3 trillion stimulus act. Now this is in addition to the CARES Act, which has already been passed. Now this stimulus act is called the HEROES Act. And while it hasn't been passed yet, it is set to be voted on by the House on Friday, at which point it's passed, which is likely going to happen. It will have to go to the Senate to actually be approved. But the reason I'm bringing up this stimulus act is because there's a lot of information in there that addresses renters, that addresses homeowners with regards to forbearance, and really clears up a lot of the confusion that's out there with the CARES Act right now. So I wanted to take the time and dive into it in a little bit more detail, actually look at the bill. It's 1,800 pages. I've gone through the real estate section, which is about 30 pages or so, and highlighted the things that I think are worth reading. So we're actually going to take a look at that bill and go over the items that I mentioned in a little bit more detail and help give you some guidance on that. Now, you might say, you know, it hasn't passed yet. Why are you even coming out with this information? And that's good logic. But to be completely honest with you, 1,800 pages, this is almost double the size of the CARES Act. So, you know, they, in the House, the Democrats took the time to actually write 1,800 pages of bill, which makes me think that a lot of this was probably pre-negotiated prior to them ever writing it. Because otherwise, why would they spend the time to write this massive bill if there wasn't some opportunity for it to pass? Now, clearly there will be some things in there that need to get adjusted, or some things that come out and some new things that come in. But the scope of it, you know, has good bones, and I think a lot of it will likely pass and address the concerns that we've discussed. Now, one of the things that, you know, has nothing to do with real estate that is helpful, worth mentioning, is that they are going to do a second round of stimulus. So that second round of stimulus is $1,200 per individual, just like it was initially. Same income limits for the most part. But the big change is, instead of $500 per child, it's $1,200 per child, up to $6,000 per family. So if you have 3 children and 2 adults, then essentially $6,000 of stimulus money coming your way, assuming it gets passed. But we aren't there yet. But with that said, let's dive into the part that deals with landlords, that deals with renters, that deals with homeowners in regards to forbearance, and help guide you through some of that language, and we'll discuss it at the end.
All right, so here we are. So the protecting renters and homeowners from evictions and foreclosures. So the homeowner part actually starts on page 961 of 1,815 pages. Crazy, I know, right? But let's talk about some of the things that are most important to those that are out there, you know, that are struggling with paying rent, landlords that are wondering, you know, about evictions for clients. That's where it really starts. So, you know, a lot of you guys have reached out and said, you know, what if I can't pay my rent? What are the options? Can I stay in the place? And then on the other side, landlords are saying, hey, like, if my tenant isn't paying rent, what are my options? Can I evict them? What's this, you know, what's the statute of limitations on this sort of thing? How long do I have? So this goes in to address that, right? So, you know, it starts right here. It says temporary moratorium on eviction filing. So, you know, they go in to basically say that 36% of households in the United States, 43 million households, are renters. So, you know, that's a lot of people that are currently renting. So a lot of people that are going to be affected by what's going on right now. And then it goes on to say that, you know, Harvard have done studies where, you know, 20.8 million renters in the United States spent more than 30% of their incomes on housing in 2018. So a large percentage of the people are going to be affected here. But what the moratorium says is, during the period beginning on the date of the enactment of this act and ending 12 months after such date of enactment, the lessor of a covered dwelling located in such state may not make or cause to be made any filing with the court of jurisdiction to initiate a legal action to recover possession of the covered dwelling from the tenant for non-payment of rent or other fees or charges. So basically what they're saying, from the time that this passes, now keep in mind, it's being voted on, like I mentioned, on Friday by the House. And then it has to go to the Senate to be approved. And the Senate has already said, hey, look, we're not even going to look at this bill and consider passing it until after Memorial Day. So we're probably looking at the beginning of June before this ever happens. And so what this says is 12 months after the date that this has been passed. So, you know, most states have given the 3 months, which is part of the CARES Act, and some additional time, like, you know, New York and LA have given additional time on evictions. This says 12 months past whenever it's enacted. So it's June 1st. That means June of next year. Now, that's a very, very long time because that, takes into consideration the 3 months plus the 12 months. So that's 15 months. And then it goes on to say in here in another paragraph, which I highlighted, that even after the moratorium is up, you can't start the eviction procedure until 30 days after that. So that's 16 months if you're using the math that I just did. And in most states, the eviction process takes months. It's not an immediate process. So we're talking, 4 or 5 months after that for evictions to happen. So this could go on years for eviction filing. So that's a very, very long time, guys. It goes on to touch on the mortgage relief. Now, forbearance and foreclosure moratorium for covered mortgage loans. Now, what is a covered mortgage loan? So in the original bill, it was federally backed mortgage loan. So now what they're doing is they're replacing the federally backed mortgage loan with covered mortgage loan. So that goes in to address basically all loans outside of Fannie, Freddie, FHA, and VA, right? So those were the federally backed loans initially that we were kind of talking about. But this goes on to say covered mortgage loans. So this would include jumbo loans. This would include everybody that has a loan. And in some cases, it might include hard money loans, second trust deeds, like anything that is a loan should be covered in this part. Now it goes on to explain what a covered mortgage loan is. The term covered mortgage loan means any credit transaction that is secured by a mortgage, deed of trust, or other equivalent consensual security interest on a 1 to 4 dwelling unit. So they are talking about 1 to 4 unit properties here. They're not talking about larger properties in this specific area. And it goes on to say that, that it includes 1 to 4 unit dwelling, like I mentioned, except that it shall not include a credit transaction under an open-end credit plan other than a reverse mortgage. Now, there's a paragraph in here on reverse mortgages. I'm not going to get into reverse mortgages because that's not the majority of consumers out there don't have reverse mortgages. If you want me to do a section just on reverse mortgages and how this affects them, do me a favor, reach out. I'm happy to address it because there's a big part of this bill that addresses those. I'm not going to get into it today because the majority of you who have reached out don't have a reverse mortgage. So now it goes on to give you automatic forbearance for delinquent borrowers. What does that mean? Well, any borrower whose covered mortgage, again, any loan that became 60 days delinquent between March 13th and the date of enactment of this paragraph. So we don't know when the date of enactment is, but let's say it's in June, and who has not already received a forbearance under subsection blah, 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 shall automatically be granted a 60-day forbearance that begins on the date of the enactment, and that the borrower shall not be considered delinquent. So that means if you're already delinquent on your mortgage since March 13th, you just went delinquent, you didn't call and get a forbearance, if this is passed, it's automatically going to put you into forbearance. And those delinquent payments that you had shall not affect you at that point. They shall not be considered delinquent. That's really big language, guys, because I've been stressing this whole time that you should be in communication with your lender so that you don't get these delinquencies, which you still should be doing. But this is saying if you haven't done that, it's essentially going to be grandfathered in. At least that's the way I read it. Now it goes on, any borrower whose covered mortgage loan becomes 60 days delinquent between the date of enactment of this paragraph and the end of the covered period and who has not already received a forbearance under subsection B, whatever, shall be granted a 60-day forbearance that begins on the 60th day of delinquency. So that goes on to say once this is enacted, again, kind of touches on what I just mentioned. Now, initial extension, an automatic forbearance period under subparagraph A shall be extended for up to an additional 120 days upon the borrower's request. So it's saying that you should get an automatic extension at the end of your forbearance period for at least 120 days. But I'm not going to read the rest of this because it goes on to basically say that it shall be extended for an additional 180 days up to a maximum of 360 days. So this is saying that you should get an extension at the end of your current forbearance period for up to 360 days if you need it. It goes on to say that you've got to affirm that you're experiencing a financial hardship that prevents you from making your timely payments. Now, right to elect to continue making payments. With respect to a forbearance provided under this paragraph, The borrower of such loan may elect to continue making regular payments on the loan. A borrower who makes such election shall be offered a loss mitigation option pursuant to subsection D within 30 days of resuming regular payments to address any payment deficiencies during the forbearance. So what that says is within 30 days of you starting to make your payments again, you should be offered a loss mitigation option that allows you to address those delinquent payments, which we've discussed in other videos. Now, what are those options? It does go in here to give you more information. I'm trying to find where I highlighted it here, and I have missed it. But we'll go down here a little bit further to talk about no documentation required, because I did get to that information just a little bit further down. So no documentation required. A servicer of a covered mortgage loan shall not require any documentation with respect to a forbearance under this section other than the borrower's affirmation, oral or written, to a financial hardship that prevents the borrower from making timely payments. So all you've got to do is express that you have a hardship, and they more or less have to allow you, to grant you further extension on your forbearance term. Treatment of escrow account. So this is one of those big things that a lot of you guys have reached out and said, hey, what if I have an escrow account? Who's going to pay that? Who's going to pay my property taxes and insurance? If I'm not able to make my payments during this time. And this whole time, it's been more or less thrown back on the homeowner. You've still been responsible for your taxes, still been responsible for your insurance. The lender is only covering the mortgage payments that you're missing, or the servicer rather. And so you've still been responsible for that. Well, this addresses that. It says, during any forbearance provided under this section, a servicer shall pay or advance funds to make disbursements in a timely manner from any escrow account established on the covered mortgage loan. So this basically puts it back on the escrow companies to make those payments, to pay the taxes and insurance under this new bill if it passes. So they are going to be required to pay your property taxes and your insurance and cover that amount during the forbearance period. Loss mitigation offer before expiration of forbearance. So this is what I was talking about, where it said no later than 30 days before the end of any forbearance period that has not been extended, or 30 days after a request by a consumer to terminate the forbearance. Let's see here. Terminate, which shall be before the servicer initiates or engages any foreclosure activity listed, incurring or charging to a borrower any fees or corporate advances related to a foreclosure. The servicer shall, in writing, offer the borrower a loss mitigation option without charging of any fees or penalties other than interest, such that the borrower's principal and interest payment remains the same as it was to the forbearance, subject to any adjustment of the index pursuant to the terms of an adjustable rate mortgage, that either defers the payment of total arrearages, including any escrow advances, to the end of the existing loan term without the charging or collection of any additional interest on the deferred amount. So basically what that means is, assuming you have 14 years left on your remaining loan, what they're saying is that the lender, the servicer, should allow you to, say you missed 1 year of payments, including escrow accounts, including mortgage payments. They're saying that they should adjust your loan to a 15-year loan at that point, right? And that your payments shouldn't be any different than what they are now. They shouldn't be any higher than where they are. They can't be any higher than where they are. So that is saying that coming out of this, you should be exactly in the same position that you are now. You just might have a longer loan, which is nice, right? Let's see here. It goes on to say that notify the borrower that the borrower has the right to be evaluated for other loss mitigation options if the borrower is not able to make the payment under the option offered. So if you're not able to make the payments based on what is offered, they should give you other loss mitigation options. So that is the majority of what goes in here. Now, there is an area that talks about treatment after forbearance, and this gets into credit. So after your forbearance is over, what happens? They say right here that they may not report any adverse information to a credit rating agency. What does that mean? Well, right now, they can't report any negative activity to their credit reporting agencies. But they can let the credit agencies know that you're in forbearance, and that has been having an adverse effect on people's credit, right? People have talked about their credit score dropping because of that language used on the credit report. Well, this basically says that they may not report any adverse information. So that means that they really shouldn't even tell the servicer, the lender, that you're even, or the credit bureaus rather, the servicer shouldn't tell the credit bureaus that you're even in forbearance, because that could have a negative impact, an adverse impact on your credit. So, you know, again, we don't know how that's going to affect, but here they're addressing that where they hadn't addressed that before. Before it just said negative information. Here it says any adverse information. So, you know, that's the majority of it. It does go in again to talk about renter protections during forbearance, you know, that basically you cannot evict or initiate the eviction of a tenant solely for non-payment of rent or other fees. We talked about that initially there, you know, during that moratorium. This talks about it in more detail. You can't charge any late fees, any penalties, you know, for late payments during that time as well. So, you know, renters are going to be protected through this. That doesn't mean you can't make your payments. It just means that you should, you know, that if you can't make your payments, essentially you can't be evicted. So, you know, again, there's a lot of information here, and I'm not here to tell you, you know, that all of this is fact, right? Some of this could come out with the actual passing of the bill, but this is the majority of it, right? So I tried to highlight the things that I thought were important and that you could take away from it.
So now you can see this is a lot of information, right? There's a lot of things touched on here with regards to moratoriums, with regards to evictions, with regards to forbearance, credit issues. So there's a lot of language here that's not really clear, but you know, in reading it and reading some of the other parts of it, which I didn't discuss, you know, what I highlighted here is the basis of it for the most part. So, you know, I hope that clears up any confusion, because when it comes out, right, there's going to be some highlights that come out on this, and I'm going to do a highlight video once it's actually passed and touch on really all parts of the bill, like I did with the CARES Act, to give you more information on it. But while this is here, I wanted to give you, you know, what is currently being offered as part of the package, because if it's passed, you know, if you're currently considering forbearance, or you know, you're in the process of it and you're looking for that extension, this could address some of those concerns. But as always, do me a favor, if you have additional questions, comment below or reach out to me directly. A lot of you guys are reaching out to me directly, and I'm happy to address those questions as well. But always, I appreciate the support. I appreciate you watching, and we'll see you again soon. Have an awesome day. Bye-bye.